Hey guys, something a little bit different for you tonight. Always try to mix up the scenery a little bit for you, try to make it a little bit more interesting. Out in the rice fields up on a hill here overlooking a small town, as you can see. A couple of things to look out for. One will be me occasionally looking down, looking out for snakes, because out here in the rice fields at night you do often come across snakes out looking for mice and frogs and other things that they eat. Don't want to accidentally step on one of those guys. The rat snakes aren't too bad, they'll just hurt, but it's the mamushi and the other nasty ones that will kill you, so don't really want to step on one of those. So you'll see me looking down occasionally. The other thing is there's a bunch of Bousozuku driving around at the moment. You might be able to just hear them. If they come up that road down there, you'll probably hear them going past. We might stop for a moment if they go by. So COVID update. People have been asking because they've heard that Japan's going through a bit of a spike. So a bit of an update. Yes, we have had a spike. Tokyo topped 380 or something in one day. They were getting over 200 every day for the last couple of weeks. New cases, that is. So recently they got 380 new cases in a day or something. Osaka's had a big jump as well. Aichi's had a big jump as well. So there has been a big spike. It just seems that what happened was everyone was being really careful for a while there, and we sort of got on top of it pretty well, and it seemed like we were starting to get on top of it. And then they took the state of emergency away and relaxed everything and said, you know, you can go about your business basically, and obviously that resulted in another big spike, which is to be expected, isn't it? So just do the numbers before we do anything else, because some people are only interested in the numbers. So total number of people living in Japan, 127 million. Total number of people tested positive so far, 43,947. People discharged from hospital, 29,900. So 43,900 cases, 29,900 discharged, sent home. Total deaths so far is 1,032. So in the last week there's been about 25 or 30 deaths in the last week. A couple of interesting things noticed too, looking at the statistics, a couple of interesting things. One is the largest group of people who've tested positive are people in their 20s. So people in their 20s are the group that have had the highest number of people testing positive. You'd have to assume that's because they're sort of the most active. They're out there socialising and meeting each other and hanging out with each other and stuff, you would think. But interestingly, the highest number that tested positive was 20%, people in their 20s, and the most deaths were people in their 80s. So it's interesting, isn't it? The people in their 20s are the highest number that tested positive, and people in their 80s are the ones that are dying. So just a couple of observations. Obviously that they had that state of emergency that was pretty thorough. Again, those of you who missed it at the time, there was no laws. It was just the state of emergency was declared, and then the Prime Minister asked people to stay home. Basically, that was it. There was no laws, there was no rules, there was no penalties. You know, restaurants and places like that were still open, and lots of people just went about their daily thing. Then once they lifted that, then obviously the numbers got really bad again, and it's actually some of those numbers for Tokyo and some of the other places are actually the highest they've ever been. So it's actually worse than a spike. It's like a new high or a new low, depending on how you look at it. A couple of interesting. Oh, the other thing was the go to travel thing. That was a bit of bad luck. They take so long to make their decisions. That's the problem. They have these. You'll hear the government's considering doing this, and then the government's having a meeting about doing this. That's the way they do things here. It's really slow. So when things were good, they would have started to talk about their go-to-travel campaign to encourage people to move around in Japan and go to other prefectures and have holidays and things. But by the time they actually got around to bringing it into being on the 22nd of July, it was started, and that was the same week that we had these new highs and peaks and things. So that they're just always behind the game. They're just so slow to make decisions that by the time they make their decisions, it turns out to be the wrong thing to do. So some really confusing messages the last couple of weeks. One was telling us go to travel. except for Tokyo, you know, go to travel, everybody go traveling. And then at the same time they were telling us to stay home, and Tokyo had has a new state of emergency, Aichi, Ken had a new state of emergency, the Osaka governor telling everyone to stay home. So you can imagine lots of people are really confused, and just to complicate matters as well, the school holidays have just started. So amazingly, you would have thought they would have cancelled the school holidays. The kids have had so many holidays already this year. But the school holidays have just started, which means most kids have 2 weeks holiday. And there's public holidays as well, which means there's parents that are home on holidays as well. So, you know, some of them are going to go off on holidays and go travelling around and go other places, or go visit relatives, because it's Obon as well, which is when people usually go back to their family homes. So there will be some people who will travel, there will be some people who will stay home. So hard to know whether the school holidays just started, so it's hard to know whether the result of that is going to be more problems or less. We know a lot of people have gone, okay, state of emergency here in Aichi, so we'll stay home. But we also know some people who are listening to the go to travel thing. So really confusing, mixed messages. You know, instead of, lots of people complain that the Prime Minister isn't decisive enough. And it's sort of, you can sort of see their point. You know, if he was to stand up and just make a big declaration, look, it's got out of hand again, we need everybody to stay home, please don't go anywhere, and hit that go to travel thing on the head, throw it away. Because, you know, it's just not a good idea at the moment, obviously, is it? A couple other things that are interesting too. Just have a quick look around my feet here. Interesting couple of things when looking at the statistics. There was a whole bunch of statistics there sort of wading through. Another one was that the hospitalisation, the deaths, the percentage of deaths by people that are hospitalised in Japan with COVID is lower than it is in lots of other countries, apparently. So it was like 7% or 8% or something of people who are hospitalised with COVID actually die from it. And of course Japan's only hospitalising people who have symptoms. They send home people who don't, or who aren't very sick. They send them home to recuperate at home. So saw a couple of examples of that on television this week. Some people, a family member in a 2-story house where the sick person was upstairs and the rest of the family were downstairs. That's the way they were dealing with that. But yeah, the death rate was really low compared to other countries, and they suggested that it's possibly because the obesity rate in Japan is so low, and the diabetes rate in Japan is really low, which is 2 factors that contribute apparently if you do get COVID, that if you're obese or if you have diabetes or some other complication like that, obviously it'll make you more susceptible to being killed by the virus. So that's all that. Other than that, just the things we're seeing, we're continuing to see, some of you guys in your countries are probably seeing the same thing. We're continuing to see odd things. At the dojo yesterday, our Aikido group, everyone walked into the building, the main building. There's a sign on the door, you have to wear a mask. Everyone was wearing masks, and there was an alcohol bottle. Everyone was washing their hands with alcohol. And then we get in, and of course, you know, Aikido and Judo, you're really in each other's faces, you know, breathing pretty hard and panting and sweating and grabbing hold of each other and changing partners, you know, continually. And so it's fairly physical and fairly close contact. And our group were all wearing masks. Whether or not that's going to help when you're that close, it's hard to know. But the other group was Judo, and they were funny. They were coming in, washing their hands with alcohol and then taking their masks off and putting it in their bags. And because the Judo guys, you know what Judo's like, they're really in each other's faces and changing partners every 3 minutes. So we see a lot of funny stuff like that, where on one hand, you know, and the lockers are still, we in a previous video we told you that the lockers were still taped closed with signs on them. We showed you with signs on them saying don't use the lockers because it's dangerous because of COVID. So they've still got the lockers taped up, so they're still telling us that using lockers is dangerous, but at the same time we're allowed to roll around on the mat and get covered in each other's sweat and breathe in each other's faces. So we're not particularly worried about it in this area. The cases, so we're in Aichi, and the cases are high at the moment, probably the highest they've been, the new cases. So it is pretty bad, but in this particular area out here in the rice fields, the cases are pretty rare. There's been a couple. There's a little town nearby where there was a family 3 members of one family had it. We told you about the girl not far away from here that went to Tokyo on a bus to go to Tokyo Disney, and she caught it. So there are cases around here, but they're pretty rare. So statistically, we're not feeling like we're in too much danger. However, when they declare a state of emergency, it's really Nagoya. It's really Nagoya. In Aichi, Nagoya's got the problem, really, because that's where all the people are, 9 million people or whatever it is. But they declare the state of emergency for the whole prefecture, which is sort of frustrating for us out here in the sticks, because it affects us directly. Straight away, our income drops, because our job, when there's a state of emergency, half our income disappears straight away, or more than half our income. And we've been sort of struggling for a few months on half income, and then when they declare a state of emergency, it drops below half. It gets worse. So there's a few people around here, a lot of people around here with the same problem, that we get directly affected by the state of emergency, even though it's not really required out here. It'd be much better if the Aichi governor could just do it for the big city and leave the country folks alone, because we're pretty safe out here. But anyway, not complaining. Our thinking is, whenever they take some course of action like that, it sort of makes everyone a bit safer. So that's our thinking, even when we think it's unnecessary and even when it damages us. We talked previously about our corkboard covered in bills. It hasn't got better. We're just sort of picking the ones that really need to be paid and leaving the others for now. But look, on that too, we lost some people on Patreon, and some other people stepped up, and we really want to thank you guys. Some of the existing patrons increased their pledges, and then other new people came on board as well. So we try to thank everybody, but just a big thank you to you guys again. That's why I'm standing out here. It's 10:30 at night. Standing out here in the rice fields talking to you guys, because of those guys. If it wasn't for those guys on Patreon, we just could not afford the time to do this sort of stuff. We'd be working a part-time job, probably in the convenience. The convenience stores are all still open, of course, and they're screaming for staff, because they're as busy as ever, and they're always looking for part-time staff, the convenience stores, so you can earn $10 an hour at the conveni, $11 an hour if you work this time of night. So that's where I'd be. That's the bottom line. If it wasn't for the people on Patreon, that's where I'd have to be, because that corkboard situation with the bills is not good, and it's not going to get better in the near future. So if it wasn't for the people on Patreon, 200 people basically, of all the people who watch our videos, it's those 200 that are the ones that allow us to keep doing what we're doing with the photos and the videos and what we're doing. So again, anybody who's not on Patreon that can be, or anybody who's on Patreon that can step it up a bit, if your life and your income's pretty normal at the moment, and you can do something to help with that too, keep plugging this. But I think it's really important, those people whose lives are pretty normal, or as far as their income's concerned, their income's pretty normal at the moment, anything you can do to help the small families, because the people who are struggling, the small businesses, the businesses owned by small families. If there's a little cafe near you, or a restaurant, or some place you can go and buy a cup of coffee, or a pie, or a cake or something from some small family business, if you can do that, you'll obviously get some benefit from it yourself, some enjoyment and a few tasty calories, and it'll help those people out as well. So we're really trying to encourage people to help out those guys, because we know how they feel. We know how frustrating it is when you're wanting to work and you're wanting to earn money and you're wanting to pay your bills and you can't. And no doubt there's people watching this video in the same situation. We know there's people around the world like that. That's why we're saying, if that's not your situation, if your income is pretty normal at the moment, and there's anything you can do to help us out, it would be great. But to help out just people in your local area, if there's people in your local area that have a cake shop or a bar or something that you can go and spend a couple of dollars, we'd really encourage you to do it, because it's a good time to do it. People never appreciate it more than they would now, for sure. Small businesses that are struggling. So that's about it. Have seen lots of weird stuff. The driving around with the mask thing's pretty funny. People driving around in their own car with their mask on, or husbands and wives walking around out here in the sticks with their masks on, or driving around in their cars with their masks on. And again, it's really funny. These videos are really unpopular. There's some people who watch these videos who think we take the COVID thing too seriously, and they get really pissed off by these videos. There's some other people who think we take the COVID situation not seriously enough, right? So some people think we take it too seriously, some people think we don't take it seriously enough, and both groups of people get pissed off. Isn't that ironic? So these videos are always unpopular, but you know, again, we don't want to address this more than we have to, but this week, you know, has been a little bit newsworthy with the stuff that's going on with the increases and so on. So we knew it had to be done. Other than that, yeah, weird things. Yeah, the people driving around with the masks. Lots of weird stuff. We post some photos on Facebook and on our Patreon page of some weird stuff that some of the restaurants, sort of novelty stuff really, but some of the restaurants are experimenting with all sorts of funny things, you know, plastic partitions between diners where people are sitting there with their friends. Some of you might have seen that photo, sitting there with their friends with a plastic partition in the middle of the table. So you can't even talk to each other, you know, sitting there, which makes you wonder why they'd bother. You know, why would you go to a restaurant and sit at a table with your friend with a plastic partition between you? It just seems ridiculous, doesn't it? And funny masks. One of the family restaurants has developed this thing that goes on your mask. So you lift your mask up to your nose and you hang this thing off your mask in front of your face. So it's sort of like you can wear this hanging down curtain in front of your mouth, and so you can put your spoon or your fork or your chopsticks up behind it while you're eating, which is just ridiculous, you know. I mean, why would you bother? You know, if it's that bad, if it's that dangerous in that place, it'd be better to go home, wouldn't it? But we're seeing lots of stuff like that, and it's sort of, they're sort of or catering for people that are really, really paranoid, but not paranoid enough to stay home. And then a part of it too is probably just a bit of promotion. You know, we're taking COVID seriously, and here's this innovation that we had, this interesting mask or this interesting divider or this other interesting thing, and because Japanese people love sort of novelty stuff like that too, you know. So yeah, there's been a fair bit of that. There's weird stuff, a lot of it, that we're seeing on TV as well. Oh, Abe mask. Here's a funny thing. We did a video about the Abe mask, so the mask that Abe-san got distributed to all the people in Japan, and it's just too small. We showed you that. It's just too small, doesn't cover your mouth and your nose at the same time. It's really annoying. So you rarely see someone wearing an Abe mask. It's even too useless for kids, so you rarely see one. But Abe-san, Prime Minister Abe, was still wearing his he sort of had to, didn't he? Because it's all... Sorry guys, the conversation got so boring that the camera got bored and fell asleep. No, it didn't. The battery died. Sorry about that. Not sure where we got to. Was talking about the Abe mask and how nobody was wearing the Abe mask in Japan except Prime Minister Abe was wearing it. And then recently he stopped. And I mean, he's sort of obliged. He was sort of obliged to keep wearing it because he'd spent millions of dollars having it distributed to every person in Japan. Or actually, there's 2 of them were sent to every household in Japan. And so he spent millions of dollars, and it was a real flop. Everyone hated the Abe mask. It was too small, it was impractical, it didn't work, and nobody wore it basically. But because he'd spent millions of dollars sending it all out, he's sort of obliged to wear his, right? So everywhere he went, everyone was wearing big proper masks, and he'd always wearing his tiny little Abe mask. Anyway, recently, well, here come the Bousozuku. If you haven't seen the video on the Bousozuku that we've got already, have a look on the Wheels in Japan playlist. A bunch of guys on motorbikes making as much noise as possible. They don't go fast. They just go they go the same speed as the traffic or slower. But they just like to make lots of noise. Hey, see the police car at the back? It's probably a bit hard for you guys to see, but there was a police car at the back going along with its red lights on, just sitting behind them. And if you haven't seen our video on the Bousozuku, have a look in the Wheels in Japan playlist, or go to our channel page and search Bousozuku or Noisy or something like that. And you'll see our video, exactly the same thing. We actually drove along with a big group of those guys and a police car following along like that. They don't actually stop them, they don't actually penalise them, they just watch them, which is totally pointless. Here comes the next group. Annoying, isn't it? Actually, that video we made about those guys was like the definitive video on those guys, because we actually drove along in the middle of a group of them. So actually what I'll do, I'll find it for you and I'll put it on Patreon. I'll put it on Patreon so the guys on Patreon don't have to go looking for it, it'll already be there. So keep in mind, this is a quiet little town. That's a main road. That's why we get those guys come through sometimes. But you know, it's probably 11 o'clock at night by now. And you know, kids and old people are sleeping, and these turkeys come along. Here comes the next group. There's a lot of them. Anyway, I'll finish this up. The so Abe stopped wearing his Abeno mask, and because that's been in the media a lot recently too. That you know he's acknowledging it's not even good enough for him to wear. You know, even he's not satisfied with it, and he spent millions of dollars having it distributed. So distracting, isn't it? So the first time you see a group of Bousozuku, it's sort of interesting. After hearing them every weekend for a couple of decades, you get sort of sick of them. You find out from people who've lived here long term that they have no respect for the Bousozuku at all, because it's just a pointless, childish, you know, annoying, severely antisocial behaviour, isn't it, you know? You know, we know some bikers who are really good guys, but you know they wouldn't be doing pointless crap like that at 11 o'clock at night. You know, geez, a lot of them. This is a lot more than we normally get on a Saturday night. A couple of tailors at the end. Anyway, so that was the COVID story. Those of you who've been asking for the COVID update, that was that. Check out the Bousozuku video. If you haven't had a look at our Patreon page yet, please have a look at that. And we'll keep you informed. That's ridiculous. Might actually take the camera down there and see where those guys have gone. If it's anywhere interesting, might post another video. Anyway, that was that. More videos coming soon.